And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Want to get into one of these other pretty big headlines today, and this is what we know. The Biden administration today seized Kremlin-run websites. They also charged 2 Russian state media employees in its most sweeping effort yet to push back against what it says are Russian attempts to spread disinformation ahead of the November presidential election. You've heard that term before, Russian election interference. Fox News correspondent Connor Hansen, our friend there, has more. Let's watch.
The American people are entitled to know when a foreign power is attempting to exploit our country's free exchange of ideas in order to send around its own propaganda.
Attorney General Merrick Garland sat next to FBI Director Christopher Wray, announcing new steps they're taking to fight Russian disinformation ahead of the 2024 election. 2 employees of Russia's state-controlled media outlet, RT, were indicted for alleged conspiracy to commit money laundering and violating the Foreign Agents Registration Act.
We allege that as part of that effort, RT and its employees, including the defendants, implemented a nearly $10 million scheme to fund and direct a Tennessee-based company to publish and disseminate content deemed favorable to the Russian government.
The FBI says China has also been involved in election meddling, specifically with down-ballot candidates it sees as a threat. And FBI Director Wray says they're dealing with attempted election interference from several foreign adversaries.
Russia is by no means the only adversary we've seen try to meddle in our society and democratic processes. Just last month, for instance, the FBI, working with the broader intelligence community and CISA, called out Iran for targeting and attempting to compromise former President Trump's campaign. As long as adversaries keep trying to influence and interfere in our society and our democratic processes, they're going to keep running into the FBI.
The Justice Department also highlighted several instances of violent threats against local election workers. In New York, Connor Hansen, Fox News.
Connor, thanks so much. Well, the U.S. Department of Treasury also out with a statement today saying this, going into detail about what some of these malign activities are. They say beginning in early this year, executives at RT is Russia's state-funded news media outlet, began an even more nefarious effort to covertly recruit unwitting American influencers in support of their malign influence campaign. They say RT used a front company to disguise its own involvement or the involvement of the Russian government in content meant to influence U.S. audiences. In the meantime here, let's talk about this even further. We're just 62 days away from the presidential election. We're going to talk about it with none other than our friend, national security analyst and expert and retired Marine intelligence officer, Hal Kempfer, and Peter Doran at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. They join me. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us here. Peter, I'm going to start with you because I think when American viewers and consumers of news hear this, they might be thinking to themselves, I'm smart. I probably wouldn't be convinced or persuaded or duped by something on social media that was trying to influence me here. What is the influence at play here that the DOJ is trying to thwart, that the DOJ has now issued these actions over? How strong is the influence, I guess I'm asking?
Well, thanks, Andrew. Today's announcement, I'd say it's good news for America and embarrassing for Russia. So what the Department of Justice's indictments show is that American efforts to counteract disinformation, it's like weeding a garden. It requires constant vigilance. But what's embarrassing for Russia is the rudimentary and I'd say unsophisticated nature of the networks that the DOJ has rolled up. Andrew, spoofing internet domains like WashingtonPost.pm, which is an obscure island off the coast of Newfoundland, if you believe a news story is from that internet source, that's going to be on you. Other efforts that are being alleged is that the Russian government set up internet sock puppet accounts and has used front companies to spread money around in the U.S. media environment. But in many cases, these are still rudimentary techniques that we've known for over a decade, Andrew.
Hal, my question, though, and to that point Peter is making, witting or unwitting, do these efforts really have the potential to sway one of our votes, any member of the American electorate here, if you go into the ballot box and you see something peddled by these Russian operatives and actors here, is that the threat? Is that what Merrick Garland and Christopher Wray are warning against? Is that why they took action today? To my point, the seriousness of it, if what Peter is saying, and it's spelled out in the indictment, is so rudimentary, what is the threat?
Andrew, the threat is it's going to influence some, and part of it's the direct impact. They send out these. Used to be they used to be bots or whatever, but now they're setting up these fake accounts. Some of the stuff, as Peter pointed out, is really kind of ham-handed. I mean, you can clearly see it. But I will tell you, you and I have talked about this. I get trolled on a regular basis on social media by what I know are Russian actors or Russian AI or something like that. And you look at it and you go, it looks very close to something that's real, but it's not. And what bothers me is then I get stuff from people I know who picked up on that. Then they're reposting it or sending it forward. That's the danger. And that's where, we're talking about, it's like a garden. You got to prune it. You got to weed it all the time because you got to keep this stuff cut back. By the way, it's not just Russia. China does it too. Iran does it too. North Korea tries to do it. They're not quite as sophisticated. But anyway, China is very sophisticated, but it's all about perception management. It's about influence operations, and there's a lot of different facets. And I'm really glad that the DOJ did this.
Yeah, Peter, you mentioned this is kind of like weeding the garden, and it's very, very difficult here. Does that necessarily make the effort, a fool's errand in trying to combat the spread of misinformation, false actors peddling that misinformation, false actors working on behalf of, nefarious and malign foreign governments here? I think to, Hal's point, is it incumbent upon all of us to make sure we know the difference, to make sure we're not getting duped here? Is there a collective action mentality at play when you read an indictment like this, to know the warning signs, so to speak, to make sure you're getting your information from a good source?
Absolutely. And I would stress this is a positive outcome by the Department of Justice. They have revealed that Russia intends to interfere in our election. Now, as we have seen in the past, Russia has failed to ultimately change the outcome of elections, but it shows that Russia continues to be up to its old tricks. 10 years ago, many Americans were unfamiliar with these techniques. Now we are becoming more sophisticated as consumers of media, and we are starting, like the DOJ, to identify early where these sources of malign influence are coming from. And I would underscore what Hal said. It's not just Russia. In fact, I would point to Iran as well, which has recently shown that it too is trying to interfere in our elections. That's why it is incumbent for every voter to exercise a bit of sophistication when they go online and they search for news.
I mean, hell, the editor-in-chief of RT was swept up in this. RT has been operating in the United States for years. Yes, it's a Russian propaganda news outlet here in the United States. Nonetheless, they're free to operate here, and they were swept up in this indictment. Her name, Margarita Simonyan. That is quite stunning. Does that speak to the lengths the DOJ, Treasury, the FBI are going to nip this in the bud?
Well, I think it really does. And it also says something about RT. Years back, I mean, I'm talking many years back, certainly before COVID and stuff, RT had a presence out here. I would, in my dealings of doing stuff, every once in a while, you'd see RT news crews pop up at events. And I always thought it was kind of a little bit different, but they were there. And of course, things have changed a lot. In the last 2.5 years, things have changed dramatically. But RT is known to be basically an arm of the Russian government, if you will. And I'm glad to see DOJ doing this because it puts RT in the crosshairs. They are a propaganda outlet, if you will. They are a disinformation outlet. And I think this is one of the ways that our government can kind of deal with this. And remember, we got freedom of the press, but not all the other countries in the world really respect that. They see the press as just a way to persuade people's minds to the way the government wants to think, and that's what RT is to the Russians. I'm glad to see us using this vehicle. This is something I think that it has a lot of potential. I'd like to see it applied more with the Chinese and the Iranians as well.
You know, Peter, I'm reading from the press release by Treasury and the DOJ today. They say all property and interests in property of the designated persons described that are in the U.S. or are in the possession or control of U.S. persons are blocked. They seized domains today. I mean, that's pretty serious here. This isn't just warning about the threat. This is decisive action to neutralize said threat here. That was quite something to me, seizing website domains in order to just essentially take the information down.
That's right. But as I said earlier, many of the domains that were set up were intentionally designed to deceive readers. So if you thought you were reading an article from the Washington Post, it wasn't really the Washington Post. And Andrew, this is one of the problems that the DOJ has identified and is attacking now. It's called narrative laundering. So what Russia will do through outlets like RT and others is set up a public lie. It's propaganda. Then they will have other news outlets say, people are saying, reports saying, and then Russia will then report on what's happening in the West. It's a way to launder a narrative through our media space. So the big win here for the DOJ and for the United States is to attack those nodes that amplify Russian messages and allow them to launder their narrative, Andrew.
Yeah, definitely. Peter Doran, Health Comfort, we're going to have to leave it at that. Can't thank you enough for your time. We'll definitely be following up on this story. I think we're going to hear a lot about malign actors and election interference threats in the next 62 days. Thanks so much, gentlemen.